Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to our CSGO News episode. Hope you guys all had great weekends. All of today's stories, as per usual, will be timestamped down below. And today is the day where I'm going to give you quick, easy news. I'm not going to try and ramble on too much, but some big things, of course, did happen this past weekend. As you guys can tell by the thumbnail, what a surprise. We'll talk about Sao Paulo a bit later on. But first off, probably in biggest news out there, Cloud9 have now finalized their yet again temporary roster. It will be a stand-in player from Rogue. If you guys were here last week, unfortunately enough, Rogue has stepped away from CSGO, and we were correct. We talked about in the episode because their roster had changed over time and time again financially, and as an organization, it can be so tough to try and retain a roster when you lose two players at a time, Katie and Ricky, and then MSL and Nico as well, apparently, and now Vice on top of that. It can be very hard and a very tenuous process to try and keep a roster that arguably does not want to stay there. So Rogue step away, and now one of their former players, that being Vice, will be joining Cloud9 as a stand-in / temporary player, and I hope this one lasts. I really can't say too much. I'm not going to give you guys my full thoughts about this because there are so many players currently in the NA scene that Cloud9 could have signed that I'm going to label as high potential players. I think Sick could have been one of them as well. We look back to the TSM days, and I think a lot of us have been hoping for Sick to be a player to kind of turn around and really pop off. Cloud9 choose to add Vice, and now we have potentially a finalized roster for Cloud9, which we should see sometime soon. We're going to presume as of right now that will mean they're going to be keeping Kiyoshima. Let's go. That does mean Automac and Kiyoshima probably going to be your most consistent players on the roster, but I'm still very questionable about the future of Cloud9, what they can actually prove to do, because yes, you have Rush, and who's direly inconsistent. I don't think anyone's going to argue that over the past few months. Just a very inconsistent, another high ceiling cap player, but very inconsistent. You have your Automatic and Kiyoshima, I think very solid players. Golden has stepped away for several months, and he's coming back to IGL, a brand new roster that when he was first a part of this team, when Golden first came on, was a completely different team. And now we have Vice, a player a lot of us do not know a lot of details about. So Cloud9 has plenty to prove, but they have arguably probably finalized their final roster, and I hope this roster plays together long enough where we can actually see what they're capable of. And if anyone still is following Polish CSGO, I will say one thing. I think Polish CSGO is in a very, very weird state right now. Along with that, you could argue North America is as well. Besides Astralis, it seems many teams out there are struggling to find exactly what they want right now, but Polish CSGO, I could argue that three rosters, AGO, Kinguin, and Virtus.pro, are all around the same level. They're not standout, they're not, they're not bad, but they're kind of in the level right now that we see them in. It's going to be Virtus.pro making changes, though. It will be Snack standing back in as an IGL, and that does mean Tao, who they acquired from AGO several months ago, he'll be on the bench or on the reserve roster. So Virtus.pro is still making changes. They actually, for a short amount of time, I think they took down AGO. They had some decent results and then kind of reverted back to their old ways. It's shocking to see a Virtus.pro roster change that I'm not really, too crazy about right now. I'm not really too hyped to share with all of you. Also bouncing off that, though, unfortunate news, as we did expect, has now been confirmed by IEM themselves for IEM Sydney, a tournament coming up within a month or two here that will be, of course, IEM Sydney. It was a spot argued by many that Swole Patrol did earn. Then eUnited, of course, they bought out the majority of the Swole Patrol roster. So by rulebook, by fairness, that roster, the new eUnited roster is now retained the IEM Sydney spot as now confirmed. So not too big of news out there. It was pretty much expected. Yes, it's sad to see, but when you play by the rulebook, this definitely made the most sense. Also, bouncing off that, something I'm super excited about. There are only a few North American teams which I really fanboy behind, and this new roster might be exactly that. That being the brand new Envy roster. I'm so used to saying envious. I wish they never would have changed that. They now have acquired, though, three brand new players. If you guys do know, Kerrigan was potentially going to re-sign with these guys. He chose not to. They've now replaced Drone and Cutler, and it will be Sam and Jordan Fugly to join this new roster alongside JDM and Nifty, and I am super hyped about these guys. I think you arguably keep your bet. I think, no really argument, to be honest. You keep the better half of this roster, and people that are certainly hyped up on JDM, if he can become a North American. I know there's a lot of potential here, okay? I'm going to say this time and time again, but if JDM can become the opera that we always wanted to see, obviously super talented as well, Nifty and unlockable potential there as well, definitely the better half of your roster, and then you join Sam, an up-and-comer we have seen over the past 2 months with incredible talent. You have Android, people think is widely underrated. Who knows what he's capable of, and I think it all falls on the shoulders of Fugly and how he can actually make these players mesh. Yes, it's a huge responsibility for this guy, but I certainly do think this roster has some heavy unlockable unlockable potential, and I think major potential, and I mean that unironically, guys. I think this team is a major contending team in the fact they can actually get to the major. What can they do once they get there? Who knows? Now, again, we know the North American minor, as well as any minor out there, is going to be super competitive, but this roster, nonetheless, no doubt in my mind, is a huge improvement for Envy in the future of 2019. And we also had Blast Pro Sao Paulo this past weekend. Now, I know we all are probably thinking somewhat the same thing. You can't take much away from Blast Pro series, although I will say one thing. When I first made a tweet about this, you guys, several of you have contacted me and tweeted back at me saying Blast Pro events, the live event, the actual production value is amazing. I don't doubt that whatsoever. When it comes to the actual format of the event, though, the best of ones, the no tiebreakers to get to final or to get to those final placements, I don't like that too much. The no overtimes really bothers me. A great event. Nonetheless, I'm sure they put on a great production value. They do put on a great broadcast as well for the event. We just can't take much away from the results itself, but who would have guessed it, right? Another Astralis Liquid final, although you could have argued that ENCE and Liquid should have had some sort of tiebreaker. I do not like when two teams have the same record competing for a grand final spot. The fact that round differential is what separates those two teams, especially when Liquid and ENCE in their best of one, they tied 15-15 and they had the same record. Let those two teams play out. Even a best of one tiebreaker or a best of three would be preferable to see who takes the grand final spot, because when it comes down to two teams who are 3-1-1 and they tied each other in their best of one, I think they deserve a chance to actually play and see who the better team is to play against Astralis. That really bothered me. Either way, I think ENCE have now proven themselves. Again, not taking too much away from the results here. ENCE have now proven themselves in a lot of multiple formats so far. They are still a top contending team, and if they showed these same results at a best of three tournament, I would consider them in my book to be a top 5 team now contending, and I'm very excited to see what these guys can do in the future months. Now, when it comes down to Astralis, though, they go 5-0 groups. I think they dominate that 2-1 series besides a close map 1 on Dust 2 against Liquid. They are still looking stellar. They're still looking like the best team in the world, so no surprise there. Liquid a close second. ENCE is certainly in the running as well, although I still do think they had a chance to make the grand final if given a better format. And then we see MIBR, probably the biggest shock so far. NIP kind of the neutral middle of the pack group there, but MIBR and FaZe continue to struggle in this format. So for the third time, I'm not taking too much away from this. If you look historically in the past 6 months and at many of the Blast Pro events or any events out there with best of one majority formats, FaZe and MIBR are 2 of your top struggling teams. So I would not take too much from that, guys. Although not looking too impressive for some of those matches, I'm not going to say too much about that. But also, very lastly, for all of you guys, some big news out there. I'm going to try and track some larger qualifiers in terms of this one being DreamHack Masters Dallas, because a lot of top contending teams from North America and Europe did compete for these 2 spots for Europe and this 1 spot for North America, and it's going to show us a lot for these new lineups out there. Envy being one of them, they made a pretty strong run. They took down Ghost Gaming, took down Complexity. They did fall short because North America only was given 1 spot. It's going to be Furia, though, who takes that North American spot. They did so by running the table. This was probably your favorite team alongside maybe a Complexity, if you guys believed in those two teams to probably go through with that spot. I think Furia did a great job. I think it's very ironic. I was actually looking over this because I do follow the old case of Swole Patrol eUnited very closely. I'm going to show you guys something. It was actually pretty funny to see this. You could not make this up. This is almost like a CSGO movie little timeline for all of you. You go back to IEM Sydney Qualifier. It was Swole Patrol. They beat eUnited in the upper bracket semifinal. They swept them there. eUnited comes back through the lower bracket. They re-meet up in the grand final where Swole Patrol sweeps them again with a 1-map advantage because they came from the upper bracket. eUnited came from the lower bracket. This past weekend at DreamHack Masters Dallas, this is crazy. Furia did the same exact thing. They beat eUnited in the upper bracket semifinal. eUnited with the Swole Patrol roster they bought out after losing to them at IEM Sydney. They go through the lower bracket again. They meet up Furia in the grand final, and Furia sweeps them again with a 1-map advantage. So we know what's going to happen next, right? eUnited's probably going to buy out Furia. But all jokes aside as well, for the European qualifiers, I was super impressed. If you look at a team like ENCE, I think obviously with their major run as well as their previous runs, and now of course Blast Pro, Sao Paulo. Another team I look out there is Windigo, guys. They are looking absolutely stellar. It's making me all the more nervous for when we come to the European minor time, because these European teams are absolutely insane, and this is the Windigo I've wanted to see for quite some time. Of course, last week they take WESG, the 500K title there. This week as well, they take a spot at DreamHack Masters Dallas, but they do so in just amazing fashion. They take down G2. They also take down some other top teams, eventually a Vanguard as well to qualify for that spot. Windigo looked very stellar in doing so. And then you look at a team like G2 and this roster as well, this new roster, their first run with their new roster. Dare I say it, it might be too early because we usually see this when G2 changes their roster for the first time. I don't know if it's a trend for them. When they make their first changes, the first tournaments or first qualifiers they usually go to have been quite promising. I don't know if this is a fluke right now, but G2 really impressed me this past weekend because they lose to Windigo in an extremely close series. Either way, either team could have won this series as well. They go to the lower bracket and they take down HR, Valiance, and a Vanguard in all 2-0 sweeps in all very, very dominant fashion. I think there was one close map of all 6 of those, and they sweep all 3 of those teams. Very, very competitive European teams I'm sure many of you guys are aware of. HR making some amazing changes themselves. Valiance, of course, their European minor run, and a Vanguard speaks for themselves with their major run, and G2 sweep them all to claim their DreamHack Masters spot with their new roster. There's no arguing that G2 could be on the map. I think we all expected this to be an improvement for the roster, and so far it's proving to be one. I'm just so excited. We are in a time of CSGO right now where a majority of the teams you are watching have likely made some sort of roster change, and we are now going to find out over the next 60 days which teams actually made the best changes out there. So it's a great time for CSGO. But as always, hope you guys all enjoy. My name is Jake. I will be back here tomorrow with some CSGO news as per usual, maybe some other esports news out there if you guys want to check out the channel. But thank you all for watching. Seriously, for all of you guys who leave comments, I do read them all. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Drink some caffeine, drink some water, and until next time, I'll see you then.